I was mid-bite into a lukewarm deviled egg when my father cleared his throat like he was about to bless the bride. Everyone turned toward the grill. "From today forward," he said, voice high with ceremony, "you shall call my beloved daughter Layla the CEO of my farm business." People froze mid-sip. "And as for my firstborn," he added, nodding toward my sister, "she is now an outcast." I didn't move. Doreen didn't blink. The silence lasted 3 full seconds before someone, probably Jared, let out a snort. And then, like dominoes, the entire family started laughing. But not with him. At him. If you've ever stood in a room full of family and felt like the only one without a script, this story's for you. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that cut close to the bone, and turn on notifications because sometimes the quietest voices carry the heaviest truths. I stood there, paper plate still in my hand, deviled egg half chewed, watching the scene bend under its own absurdity. My father looked confused, like he'd misread the room and couldn't find the cue cards. "It's a joke," he said, gesturing to no one in particular. "Come on, lighten up." But the laughter didn't sound amused, it sounded sharp, knowing. I glanced at Doreen, who hadn't moved from her place by the smoker, just kept folding foil over ribs like none of this involved her. My stomach turned. He had no idea. And I suddenly realized I didn't either. The sun was boiling above the walnut trees, burning straight through the cotton of my thrifted blouse. I hadn't meant to come, hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't seen Doreen in 7 months, and yet here I was, standing in front of a family that had always treated my presence like a polite inconvenience. A few chairs down, Aunt Mona whispered something to Uncle Curtis, who shook his head and looked directly at me. Their pity stung more than the heat. My father raised his red solo cup again, smiling too wide, trying to recover. "She earned it," he said. "She's got vision." That's when Doreen finally spoke. "You mean she's got student loans?" Her voice was calm, casual, almost affectionate, but the cut was surgical. Laughter again, this time real. My face burned. I hadn't even known this was happening. No meetings. No emails. No warning. I hadn't touched a spreadsheet in months, let alone helped run the business. I was 2 months behind on rent in Oakland and bartending 3 nights a week to cover groceries. "Wait," I said, turning to him. "What is this?" My father just winked like we were co-conspirators. "A fresh start," he said. "For both of us." "I'm not doing this," I said, quieter than I meant. "Too late," he replied. "The documents were filed Thursday. You're already listed." Doreen's laugh then. Short, low, a laugh that said she'd been waiting for this moment. "Go check with Uncle Ray," she said, nodding toward the house. "See if the land you're supposed to run still belongs to us." That was when I noticed the way some of the cousins stopped eating. The way Aunt Patty's eyes stayed locked on her lap. Something wasn't right. This wasn't a ceremony. It was a cover-up. My father wasn't giving me anything. He was hiding something. Later, when the grill had gone cold and the music got low, I found Doreen near the rain tank, rolling a toothpick between her fingers. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. She didn't look at me. Because when you're the villain, no one listens. They just wait for you to talk so they can blame you louder. I swallowed hard. He said I was the CEO. "Sure," she said. "Of a company that's 6 months from collapse. And of land he doesn't own anymore." I stared at her. "Who does?" She tossed the toothpick to the dirt. "Ask the bank." My phone buzzed twice in my back pocket. Unknown number. Then again. I didn't answer. I just looked back toward the table where my father now sat laughing with Curtis, acting like none of this had happened. But it had. In front of everyone. Publicly. And whatever this was, it was bigger than a title. Doreen had walked away years ago and built something of her own, I knew that much. What I didn't know was why my father was so desperate to name an heir now, and what exactly I was inheriting besides shame. Doreen was halfway to her truck when she called back over her shoulder, "Read the lease in the glove box. It's dated 2 years before Mom died." The truck was unlocked, old Ford keys still dangling from the ignition like someone meant to return and forgot, and the glove box creaked open with a reluctance I understood. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe a folder, maybe a coffee-stained envelope, but what I found was a single folded lease agreement, dated 18 months before the stroke that took our mother. It was between Uncle Ray and Doreen, clear as daylight, naming her majority owner of Parcel C, which wasn't just a chunk of land, it was the grazing field, the almond rows, the land with the actual value. My legs felt soft as bread dough, but I read it twice, then once more, fingers tracing the signatures. Doreen's was neat, practiced, with a quiet confidence that hadn't come from our father. Uncle Ray had signed like a man in a hurry. There was a third line left blank, marked witness, and something in me knew it was supposed to be Dad's. My heart pounded, not from betrayal, but from the clarity of it. She hadn't stolen anything. She had saved it. "How long have you had this?" I asked later when I found her sitting behind the shed. "Since he defaulted on that second loan," she said, peeling a label off a root beer bottle. "He thought the bank wouldn't come for him if the paperwork stayed in the family." I squatted beside her, lease trembling in my hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged, but her jaw tightened. "Because you still cared what he thought, and I wasn't about to make you choose between us. I knew where you'd land." I wanted to protest, but the truth stung too close. She wasn't bitter. She was tired. And I'd mistaken that tiredness for silence. I asked her what she meant by collapse, and she pulled out her phone, scrolled through screenshots of unpaid invoices, court letters, liens, real ones, not threats. The business had been underwater for months, and our father had been funneling the last of the operational money into some kind of livestock tech venture in Fresno, one that hadn't made a profit in 2 years. "He's naming you CEO," she said, "so when the whole thing finally crumbles, you're the one they call. You're the one they sue." My throat went dry. That's why he smiled like that. The realization didn't hit all at once, but in slow, jagged pieces. I thought about the cousins whispering, the too fast laughter, the way Aunt Mona wouldn't meet my eyes after the announcement. They all knew. Maybe not the full details, but enough. Enough to know that my father wasn't passing down a legacy. He was passing the blame. Doreen watched me, not with cruelty but with caution, like she knew exactly what was unfolding in my head. "You were always his favorite," she said, soft. "He made sure you stayed shiny so no one saw the cracks beneath." Back at the house, Dad was holding court with the uncles, talking crop rotation like nothing had shifted. When he saw me approach, he smiled like a politician, all charm and memory. "You get the paperwork?" He asked, like he'd handed me a birthday card, not a bomb. I stared at him hard until the words came. "Did you think I wouldn't read it?" His smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed. "You've always been a reader, Layla," he said, "but readers don't build things. I need a builder." I laughed, bitter in the back of my throat. "You need a fall guy." He stood slowly, brushing dust from his jeans, not bothering to hide the shift in posture. "You think you're the first person to inherit something broken," he said, voice lower now. "You think the world hands you a clean slate?" I shook my head. "I think you handed me a crime scene and hoped I'd be too flattered to notice." Around us, the table had gone quiet. I stepped back, lease folded in my hand like a weapon I didn't want to use, and turned toward Doreen's truck. She didn't say anything, just scooted over to make room. We sat in the truck for a while, radio off, engine humming like it was thinking for us. I stared at the rows of trees, their symmetry suddenly menacing. "He's going to spin this," I said. "He'll say I ran. That I couldn't handle the pressure." Doreen nodded, flicked the turn signal. "Let him. People who need a hero will always believe the one wearing the cleaner shirt. But land doesn't lie, and neither do records." As we pulled away, I looked back once. Dad didn't wave. Neither did I. Something had ended, quietly, and something else had just begun. The letter came folded in thirds, creased so tightly I had to iron it flat to read it properly, and when I did, I sat back in Doreen's kitchen chair with something between a laugh and a groan stuck in my chest. The ink was smudged, not from rain, but from sweat, his signature at the bottom heavier than the rest. It was a transfer agreement, formally handing over operations to me, retroactive to 2 weeks before the reunion. Which meant, legally, every liability on that property, every tax filing, every creditor knock, was now mine. Doreen came in carrying a laundry basket, glanced at the table, then at my face. He finally filed it, didn't he? I nodded, slid the page across. She read it without touching it. And did he include the part about the equipment lease? The 10-year one he took out against machines he never bought. I flipped the document over. There it was, line 6, subsection 4. Jesus, I whispered. She set the basket down with a sigh. He used you to reset the clock. They can't come for him now. They'll come for you. I spent the next 3 hours calling numbers from the binder he left in the tractor shed, vendors, lenders, suppliers. Most were polite, some less so. One woman, from the seed distributor, said, "You must be the daughter." We were wondering when he'd finally dump it on someone. Every page I turned felt like a setup. Overdue bills, contract penalties, missed certifications. The farm wasn't just failing. It was buckling under the weight of someone else's pride. And I was the last one holding the rope. That night, I found Doreen on the porch swing with a glass of cider and her phone resting face down. He made sure it was official, I said. Signed, sealed, and sinking. She didn't respond, just offered me her drink. I took it. There are liens against the livestock, I said. I didn't even know cows could be collateral. She finally looked at me. Everything is collateral if you're desperate enough. I asked her how long she'd known it was this bad, and she said, since the irrigation tanks cracked and he said God was testing his faith instead of calling a plumber. I laughed, too tired to mean it. We sat in silence, listening to frogs somewhere out past the alfalfa line. I could feel it. The land still breathing beneath us, tired but not gone, waiting for someone who would actually listen. You could fight it, she said. Challenge the filing. Say it was done under false pretenses. I shook my head. And let him tell everyone I walked away when things got hard? I set the glass down, the cider warm now. I want to see what's salvageable. If anything. She didn't smile, but I saw something shift in her. Approval, maybe. Or relief. Then you'll need the real numbers. I have them. From when I was running Parcel C. I blinked. You still kept books? She nodded. The kind the bank doesn't see. The kind that show what the land actually makes, not what he tells people it does. We moved inside, spread out binders and notebooks across her kitchen table until midnight. Every page was a breadcrumb trail, and for the first time, I saw it clearly, the bones of something that could work, if handled with care. Doreen pointed at one chart, her handwriting small but steady. This is what I'd fight for, she said. If it were mine again. I looked at her. It could be, I said. If you help me. She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded, slow. All right then. Let's see if we can unfuck a legacy. By Thursday morning, the accountant called. Not the old family one he'd stopped answering months ago, but a quiet man named Sims who'd been recommended by one of Doreen's co-op partners. He met me on the porch in a beige windbreaker and brown loafers, carrying a laptop under one arm and a thick envelope under the other. Ms. Dawson, he asked, gentle but firm. You're about 3 weeks from breaching state compliance, and there are payroll taxes from 2022 that were filed late or not at all. I nodded, hands already shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what was real. We sat at the kitchen table, same one Doreen and I had covered in ledgers just days before. Sims clicked through spreadsheets, showing me negative balances, interest charges, lines of credit I didn't even know were open. I watched it all unfold like a drowning person watches the surface, close enough to see, too far to reach. There's a way through this, he said eventually, but it will take consolidation. And transparency. Doreen leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. Start with Parcel C, she said. That one actually turns a profit. He looked up. And who owns Parcel C? We went quiet. I glanced at her, unsure what to say. Technically, she said, clearing her throat, I do. Sims blinked. So this isn't a sole proprietorship. I shook my head. It was. It isn't anymore. He closed the laptop with a soft click. Then you're going to need to file a partnership agreement, or this whole structure folds in audit. Outside, I could hear the irrigation pipes kick in, automatic, impersonal, still running on timers my father had set. Is there any cash flow we can use now? I asked. He pulled out a sticky note and wrote 2 numbers. This is what you owe this month. This is what you have. The gap between them was laughable. I read it 3 times, like it might change. So, what's the next step? I asked. Talk to the suppliers, he said. Negotiate extended terms. Offer honesty. It'll buy you some time. I spent the rest of that day calling every name on the vendor sheet, my voice raw by sunset. Some agreed, some didn't. One hung up after saying, "Your father owes me 4 seasons. You think I trust his daughter?" I didn't respond. Just stared at the silent phone, wondering what part of my face they heard when I spoke. That evening, Doreen brought in a crate of old co-op brochures, dumped them on the counter, and started flipping through. What are we looking for? I asked. Alternatives, she said. People who already believe in hard soil and slow return. She circled a few names. 2 seed providers, 1 composting group, and jotted down figures. If we can pivot, she said, we can cut input costs by 40%. It won't save us, but it'll slow the bleeding. I nodded, exhausted. I don't know what to say. She handed me a highlighter. Then don't. Just listen. Later, while she cooked pasta in the tiny galley kitchen, I sat with a stack of unopened mail from the farmhouse. Most were bills, but one was addressed to me, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. He's still naming you in the deal with the Fresno investors. My chest tightened. I read it again. What's that? Doreen asked. I handed it to her. She read it, face unreadable, then tossed it on the burner for a second too long before blowing it out. If they think they're getting anything from this place, they've miscalculated. That night, we walked the perimeter of the property line, boots crunching over dry stalks, coyotes howling in the far dark. I think he knew exactly what he was doing, I said. Doreen nodded. Of course he did. But he also thought we'd break. That we'd turn on each other. I looked up at the stars, a sky that hadn't changed even when everything else had. You ever regret staying? She paused. Only when I thought I was staying alone. I didn't answer. I just kept walking, 1 foot in front of the other, because that's all you can do when the land remembers more than you. The morning Doreen handed me the keys to the shed. Her fingers lingered against mine for half a breath, not in ceremony, just habit, an old rhythm between siblings who'd both carried too much. The compost mix is low, she said, wiping her hands on her jeans, but I called Reggie from Salinas. He'll drop off extras if we pay cash. I nodded, tucking the keys into my back pocket, still not used to being trusted with real things. We were running on favors and borrowed grace, and somehow, it still felt more solid than anything our father ever promised. Down by the southern field, I met Reggie just past noon. He wore a battered straw hat and smelled like cedar smoke, his handshake firm but careful. You Doreen's sister? He asked, eyeing me over the truck bed. The one who got dropped in the deep end? I smiled, tired but real. Something like that. He looked over the cracked fencing, the rusted irrigation pipes, then nodded. All right. I'll help you out this once. But don't lie to me like your father did. I didn't flinch. I won't, I said, and meant it. By the 3rd week, I started sleeping deeper. The kind of sleep that isn't about rest, but about knowing you've done everything you can that day. Doreen and I fell into rhythm, rotating shifts, taking calls, writing notes on the fridge with smudged dry erase markers. We didn't talk about our father much. He sent a text once, hope it's going well, and neither of us replied. The silence wasn't cold. It was clean. I told Sims we'd file as a co-op by spring, and his pause before responding told me he didn't think we'd make it that far, but he said he'd help anyway. On Sunday, I found an old tin under the porch, full of photographs, black and white ones of our grandparents standing in the same fields we were trying to resuscitate. There was one of my mother, sun in her hair, holding a chicken like a newborn. I carried it inside, set it gently on the counter. She knew, I said aloud, and Doreen looked over. Knew what? I turned the photo toward her. That it would come back to women to clean up the mess. Doreen didn't smile, but her shoulders eased. Then we're doing it right. The call came just before dusk, Uncle Ray, voice graveled with smoke and worry. He's telling people you forged it, he said. That you faked the transfer. That you took the farm out from under him. I didn't answer right away. Just watched the goats grazing near the barn, their quiet chewing steadier than my breath. Can you prove it? I asked finally. Doesn't matter, Ray said. He's saying it. And folks around here listen more to stories than documents. I thanked him, hung up, then stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. That night, Doreen poured 2 glasses of the cheap wine she'd been saving and handed me one without speaking. We sat on the steps outside, feet bare, wind brushing against our ankles. He's never going to stop, I said. She took a sip, looked out at the moonlit dirt. No, but he's not going to win either. I tilted my head. How do you know? She tapped her glass against mine. Because we're still here. And this place, for the first time, isn't about him anymore. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the field, a sprinkler clicked to life. We started writing our own ledger, one that didn't just track profit but what was planted, what survived, what bloomed late. I made notes in the margins when Doreen laughed out loud, when Reggie brought tamales, when the neighbor's kid waved on his way to school. The numbers were still rough, the deadlines close, but it didn't feel like collapse anymore. It felt like tilling, like breaking apart the hard, packed ground to make way for something new. And maybe, I thought, that's the only kind of inheritance worth keeping, the kind you rebuild yourself, piece by piece, with both hands dirty.